Thank you, Madam Speaker. I beg to move that a bill entitled An Act to Make Provisions of a Financial Nature and for Other Related Matters be now read a second time. Before you is the Finance Bill 2021, aimed at putting in place the remainder of the fiscal measures that were announced in this Honourable House on October the 5th, 2020. I would also indicate how we're going to...
Yes. Madam Speaker, I'm sorry to disturb the Minister, but there's one matter we see clarification. Is the member for Couva South and member for Barataria Sawa permitted to return to the House?
They've been asked to leave for the rest of the day's sitting. Continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. That was not necessary. There's another matter that I will address at the end that does not require legislative amendment. Looking at the clauses of the bill now, one by one, the clause 1 is self-explanatory, the title. As we move along through the bill, there are four main measures or groups of measures that were announced in the 2021 budget statement, which are addressed in this bill. The first set of measures is an increase in penalties with respect to the Pre-Deal Larceny Prevention Act, Summary Offences Act, Tobacco Control Act, Children Act, State Lands Act, Minerals Act. Those are the ones that I see. So that's the first group, increase in the penalties within those acts. I would not get into any great detail on those measures, Madam Speaker. I explained them during the budget statement, and I would expect other members on this side to explain them in a little detail today. The second group of measures relates to a tax amnesty. This administration has done 3 tax amnesties so far, which have been extremely successful. And I will explain the current tax amnesty that we intend to implement as I go along. The third set of measures deal with the regularization, or the liberalization is a better word, of the fuel pricing regime in Trinidad and Tobago. And there's one other clause that deals with an increase in the borrowing limit under the Development Loans Act. So as we go through, clause 2 seeks to amend certain sections of the Pre-Deal Larceny Act because the existing fines are not considered to be adequate. Similarly, under the Summary Offences Act, the penalties are also not considered to be adequate. That deals with Section 23 of the Summary Offences Act, which speaks to theft of agricultural produce, which is being amended by Clause 3 of the bill. We are also looking at increases in penalties to protect children, so that we are moving to increase the penalties under the Tobacco Control Act and the Liquor Licenses Act in terms of the sale of alcohol and tobacco to minors. That is addressed in clauses 5 and 19 of the bill. Clause 6 deals with the Children Act and deals with increasing or implementing penalties to deal with persons who expose children to narcotics, drugs, psychotropic substances, and other dangerous drugs. That is in Clause 6, and that will amend the Children's Act, Chapter 4601, under Section 35, 36, and 37. With respect to the State Lands Act, the penalties and the existing prescriptions and provisions dealing with illegal quarrying are found to be defective or inadequate, and the Bill also seeks to amend the State Lands Act, Chapter 5701, and to deal with Section 25 of that Act in particular, which deals with digging or removal of material without a license. Fines are being increased, and a new section is being introduced to disqualify any person who knowingly trades in or uses material which is dug, won, or removed from state lands in contravention of the Act in construction projects funded by the government, and that is Clause 7C of the bill. Again, other members will deal with that in more detail. Clause 8 of the bill also seeks to increase the penalties under the Minerals Act to address the issue of illegal quarreling. So let me move now to the first substantive measure apart from these penalties. In the Budget Statement 2021, I signaled the government's intention to reform the liquid petroleum products sector. I indicated it was the view of the government that the fuel market should be liberalized once and for all. I'll now proceed to introduce the legal framework by which the sector would be expected to operate in full liberalization. The Ministry of Energy Industries, as well as operators in the petroleum product sector, are required to put in place a system to seamlessly transition into a new way of doing business. This is going to be effected by clauses 9 and 10 of the bill. And I want to state at the outset, Madam Speaker, and I think this needs to be understood and emphasized, that if one looks at the bill very carefully, one will see that clauses 9 and 10 have a commencement provision, and therefore will come into effect on such date as is fixed by the President by proclamation. And that will be seen in clause 20 of the bill, so that we will not fully implement these new provisions with respect to reform of the liquid petroleum products sector until we feel it is appropriate to do so. But we are setting in place the legal framework to allow a new system for the pricing of petroleum products. Clause 9A is straightforward. It simply renames the Petroleum Production Levy and Subsidy Act, wherever it is found in the Petroleum Act, to the Petroleum Production and Fuel Subsidy and Fuel Levy and Subsidy Act. This introduces the term fuel levy as a consequence of a newly created fuel levy, which will be applicable to persons carrying on marketing business. Clause 9B deletes two existing definitions and substitutes definitions for marketing business and trading business, making way for newly defined terms in Section 36(1) of the Petroleum Act. The purpose and significance of the definitions is to streamline the two businesses to better reflect, on the one hand, that a person operating in the marketing business will sell wholesale to gas stations retailing petroleum products, having purchased some such products from a refining or trading business. On the other hand, a person operating in the trading business will supply petroleum products only to a person operating in the marketing business. This means that a person carrying on trading business will not be able to sell petroleum products to gas stations. With respect to the Petroleum Production Levy and Subsidy Act, Chapter 6202, clauses 10A, 10B, and 10C have a similar effect as clause 9A, and they are meant to capture the new fuel levy by amending the long title to a reference that a levy will now be applicable, renaming the Act accordingly, and introducing a Part 1 and a Part 2 in the Act to provide for the mechanics associated with the fuel levy. Clause 10D amends Section 2(1) of the Act, which deals with the interpretation given to the words falling under the section. Clause 10D(1) deletes the word levy, under which the Act only relates to the levy paid by persons carrying on production business. This is necessary to provide a new definition of the word levy at clause 10DV, and it was actually 10DI previously, Madam Speaker, not 10D1, which means a levy payable by a person carrying on production business under Section 9(1) and marketing business under Section 11A1. Clauses 10D, clauses 10D 11A2 and clause 10D4, this is Roman numerals, delete and substitute the definitions for marketing business and trading business as was done under the Petroleum Act, which I addressed before. At this point, I would like to treat with the fundamental change being made to the renamed Petroleum Production and Fuel Levy and Subsidy Act. That is the introduction of the fuel levy. And this is dealt with in clause 10K of the bill, which introduces a new section 11A of the Act, which will require a person conducting marketing business to pay monthly to the Minister of Energy and Industries a fuel levy. Sections 11A2 and 11A3 provide for a monthly computation of the fuel levy in respect of sales of each petroleum product listed in the schedule of the Act. And all of this is necessary now because we are moving away from fixed prices where a surplus can be generated to prices that will move in accordance with international prices. And that is why we need to introduce the concept of a levy. At section 11A2, where a person conducting marketing business purchases petroleum products from a trading business, the formula for the fuel levy would be the wholesale price minus the ex-terminal price minus the gross margin multiplied by the volume of sales by wholesale for the month. Where a person conducting marketing business purchases petroleum products from a refining business, the formula would be the wholesale price minus the ex-refinery price minus the gross margin multiplied by the volume of sales by wholesale for the month. To have a better understanding of the calculation of the fuel levy, we need to look at clause 10D5 of the bill that inserts the following definitions. Ex-terminal price, the price at which petroleum products may be disposed of or deemed to have been disposed of by the trading business of any person to the marketing business of such person. Ex-refinery price means the price at which petroleum products may be disposed of or are deemed to have been disposed of by the refining business of any person to the marketing business or such person or any other person for disposal and use. So you have ex-terminal price, where the fuel comes in, ex-refinery price, where the fuel is manufactured. Wholesale price means the price fixed by the minister under section 31(3) of the Petroleum Act. And this is very important, Madam Speaker, because the minister now has the power to fix the wholesale price. It will give the government the flexibility, which is what we intend to do until this COVID catastrophe is over, to maintain a level of subsidy, particularly on diesel fuel. So the minister now has the power to fix a wholesale price. Under normal circumstances, that wholesale price would have been the actual price, actual world price. But because we recognize that this is not a period where we would want to impose too much hardship on the population, this will give the minister the power to fix a wholesale price which will be less than the actual price. And that is what we intend to do with respect to diesel. The gross margin means the sum of money fixed by the minister by order under section 8.3 in consideration of the cost of marketing a petroleum product. Section 11A also provides that a person conducting marketing business is required to make a return confirming the amount of volumes in liters of petroleum product sold to the Minister of Energy, no later than the 10th month of each day for the preceding month. The minister is then required to notify the marketing business of the applicable fuel levy within 5 days of receipt of the return, and the marketing business is required to pay the fuel levy to the minister within 5 days of being notified of the applicable fuel levy. The fuel levy is then to be deposited in the consolidated fund, and that is dealt with through 11B, a new clause, a new section 11B to be inserted in the Act. The succeeding or the next subsequent clause deals with the failure of a marketing business to pay the levy and introduces penalties. 11A8 will provide a defense to officers and directors of a marketing business if they do not pay the fuel levy within the specified time. The other thing that remains with respect to the fuel levy is clause 10D3, which is simply to clean up section 2.1 to introduce definitions in appropriate alphabetical order. And clause 10E also renames the fund to the subsidy fund, from which the Minister of Finance will make advances to subsidize the prices at which petroleum products are sold by persons carrying on marketing business. And I want to re-emphasize that what we are doing here is that we are linking the price of petroleum products, super gasoline, premium gasoline, auto diesel, to the world market price. But we are giving the minister the power to introduce a wholesale price which will create a subsidy, and we intend to do that with diesel fuel at this point in time. Might I say that at this time the prices of gasoline in Trinidad and Tobago are close to the world market price. They are not much different from the world market price, but the price of diesel in Trinidad and Tobago is significantly below the world market price. And there are consequential amendments in clauses 10H, I, 10J, 10I, 10K, and so on, Madam Speaker. And clause 10G deals with definitions. We need to clean up the definition section in the Petroleum Act. So those are the measures in the bill that will introduce a new system. And let me now try and break it down into its simplest form. There will be an ex-refinery price, the price at which fuel is purchased from a refinery. That fuel will then come to a trading company such as Paria, and there will be a terminal price at the terminal for that fuel. So it comes from the refinery to the terminal. Then that trading company will sell that fuel wholesale to dealers who will then retail the fuel. In all of this now, there will be transparency. The refinery price will be known, the terminal price will be known, and the wholesale price will be published by the minister and determined by the minister, and then dealers would add a margin to bring us to the retail price. And I might also say, Madam Speaker, that if it is found that after this new system is put in place, that dealers engage in unfair pricing or price gouging, that the government will take appropriate action and bring appropriate adjustments to ensure that the public is protected. But we don't expect that. We hope that that will not occur, and we expect everybody to be reasonable. And as I said, I expect the price of gasoline to be at a similar level to what exists now, and the government will continue to subsidize diesel in the near future until such time as we believe it would be appropriate to make appropriate adjustments. Let me move now to clause 11 of the bill. How much more time do I have, Madam Speaker?
3:23.
All right, I have 12 minutes, that's fine. Clause 11 is a clause that has been brought to this House on many occasions. This is simply to increase the limit under the Development Loans Act. And I can tell you right now, we have ample headroom under the External Loans Act, under the Guarantee of Loans Act. The External Loans Act is when we borrow overseas. The Guarantee of Loans Act is when we guarantee borrowing by state enterprises. Development loans is general government borrowing. And because of the level of financing we did in 2020 and continue to do in 2021 as a result of the completely unforeseen pandemic, we have found it appropriate now to increase the ceiling on the Development Loans Act, which is general government borrowing. The current headroom on that act is in the vicinity of $2.5 billion. And as we go forward, we have no idea how long this pandemic will last, and there will be a requirement for the government to, as I have said before, maintain economic momentum, and therefore it is necessary to increase the headroom and increase the limit on the Development Loans Act. And Clause 11 increases the permissible headroom under the Development Loans Act from which the government of Trinidad and Tobago may borrow from $55,000 million to $65,000 million. And as I said, this is absolutely critical for budgetary support, particularly in recurrent expenditure, and to provide the necessary support to citizens and the country at large with respect to COVID-19 relief and other measures in order to ensure that salaries are paid and to ensure that the government's development program, capital program, continues. Clause 12 of the bill amends the Government Savings Bonds Act, Chapter 7141, and the regulations under that act. The Government Savings Bonds Regulations, the National Tax-Free Savings Bonds Regulations, and the Tax-Free Housing Bonds Regulations. These amendments are born out of a recognition that the investing public in Trinidad and Tobago has faced for many years a consistent decline in Trinidad and Tobago dollar saving deposits rates. According to data from the central bank, Trinidad and Tobago dollar deposit rates have been below 1% since 2012. Currently, the average of deposit rates is about 0.7%, and it has been in that range below 1% since 2012. In 2011, it was just over 1%. And therefore, this provides no incentive and no return for ordinary people who may wish to keep their savings in a deposit account. TT deposit rates on other savings instruments, inclusive of mutual funds and credit unions, have also mirrored this trend in the 1% range. The amendments are premised on the appetite in the local community for domestic savings bonds in local currency and also in foreign currency, because the rate of interest on US deposits is even less than the rate of interest on TT deposits. And there are quite a few local investors who hold foreign currency deposits in our local banks who have foreign currency US dollar bank accounts which are earning 1% or less. And there are many people in Trinidad and Tobago, ordinary people, who would want to enhance their earning potential as well as acquire a hedge against foreign currency exchange risk. Clause 12 of the bill amends Section 3 of the Government Savings Bond Act to allow the minister to issue or exchange saving bonds in any currency or in a foreign currency. It also amends Section 3 to empower the minister to issue bonds up to a value of $3 billion in Trinidad and Tobago currency or equivalent value in foreign currency. Clause 12 amends Section 8 of the Act to allow the minister to make regulations in respect of the currency of the bonds. By order, the government will also amend the Government Savings Bonds Regulations, the National Tax-Free Savings Bonds Regulations, and the Tax-Free Housing Bonds Regulations to remove the limitation for the bonds to be in Trinidad and Tobago currency and allow for the bonds to be in any currency, any foreign currency. And what this will allow, Madam Speaker, is that whereas people are constrained now to keep their money in savings accounts at 0.5%, 0.6%, the government would now be able to offer attractive interest rates of 3% and so on. And I think this will be a tremendous boon and a benefit to all peoples in Trinidad and Tobago, ordinary people and other people likewise, that they can now get attractive interest rates on their savings. And as soon as this bill becomes law, we will be starting the process of making arrangements for inviting members of the public to invest in government savings bonds, both in Trinidad and Tobago dollars and in US dollars. The final important part of the bill is something we have done before, which is a tax amnesty. The last tax amnesty in 2019 yielded an astonishing sum of $2.4 billion, way beyond our wildest expectations. We had expected to get maybe $1 billion. We got $2.4 billion. And I may announce that it is the government's intention to lay and pass a version of the Trinidad and Tobago Revenue Authority Bill in this Parliament and complete the debate and passage of that legislation before the end of this year. So that, Madam Speaker, once again, the government is taking an opportunity to provide an amnesty, and the amnesty will deal with all taxes, corporation tax, personal income tax, etc. The various clauses of the bill establish a tax amnesty applied by virtue of Section 2 of the Miscellaneous Provisions, Tax Amnesty, Pensions, National Insurance, Central Bank Companies, and Non-Profit Organizations Act number 13 of 2019 will be applicable to interest, outstanding interest and penalties under the Registration of Clubs Act, the Income Tax Act, Corporation Tax Act, Unemployment Levy Act, Petroleum Taxes Act, Health Surcharge Act, Value Added Tax Act, Stamp Duty Act, Property Tax Act, Miscellaneous Taxes, Tourism Development Act. And there was an oversight by the draftsmen. We are going to introduce an amendment to also include the Supplemental Petroleum Tax Act. We need to address that, and I'll move that at the committee stage. You may notice there are no specific clauses referenced in the bill for these taxes that I have called out. And these will be the taxes under the Tourism Development Act. This is so because Section 103A provides for the waiver of liabilities relating to interest, outstanding interest and penalties in the Income Tax Act, and that is applied under Section 19, Section 16, Section 62A, and Section 44 of the Corporation Tax Act, Petroleum Taxes Act, Miscellaneous Taxes Act, and the Tourism Development Act, respectively. So as we make these amendments, it automatically is applied under all of these acts that I have referred to. This means that persons under those pieces of legislation will also be able to benefit from the waiver of the liability without specific sections contained in the legislation. The amnesty is applicable for the years up to 31st December 2020 and for the period 1st January 2021 to 31st May 2021. Grants relief from penalties and interest and outstanding interest once the tax liability is paid between the dates of July 5th, 2021 and September 17th, 2021. And the minister, as we have done in the past, will be able to prescribe a later date by order to extend that period if it becomes necessary. Where a tax or return under one of the taxes remains outstanding after September 17, 2021, the interest and penalties will be revived and become payable as if the amnesty did not exist. And Madam Speaker, there are just two other measures that I mentioned in the budget statement. These measures do not require legislative amendment. And these are the waiver of taxes on building materials. Let me just read the precise words from the budget statement. And they read as follows. We are removing value-added tax on the importation of building materials to be used exclusively in connection with projects, except for certain items such as road paving and aggregate material. This measure will be similar in administration to the tax concessions granted to developers for approved tourism projects and will take effect from January 1st, 2021. Well, we have not implemented that on January 1st. We will be implementing it shortly because it does not require legislative amendment. We are allowed under the Value Added Tax Act, under Section 8(4) of the Value Added Tax Act, to publish a ministerial order which will then provide for the waiver of VAT on building materials for approved projects, and the other measure was the imposition of VAT on luxury items. We are still working on these matters, Madam Speaker, but they will be completed in the near future, and I want to stress these do not require legislative action, simply an order made by the minister and subject to negative resolution. So those are the matters in the bill. Let me go through again. There will be a tax amnesty from July 5th to September 17, 2021. We are liberalizing the fuel petroleum products regime. We are increasing penalties in a number of laws to deal with matters that need urgent attention and we are seeking approval of this House to increase the headroom on the Development Loans Act. I beg to move, Madam Speaker.